So I guess that's the other possibility.
Maybe.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, this guy shows up just as I'm leaving.
Yeah, the thing is that Microsoft are very concerned about my privacy. So they decided that they had to spend 2 hours installing updates as soon as I turned the computer on. Yeah.
Are you on like a 486 or something? Was it a Commodore 64?
No. I haven't like. It did that thing where it's like 1%, and then like 10 minutes later 2%, and then that finished, and then it was like, now we have to install the next update.
Wow.
Richard, are you recording?
No, I'm not. Hang on.
Well, start fucking recording. You know I don't work with shitty sound.
Yeah. Hang on. I'm fighting Artorias, by the way.
Oh, and remastered?
Yeah.
I
thought you would have finished by now, so I was like...
Me?
Yeah.
No, I only...
No, I thought you two would have finished recording by now.
Oh, so you strategically planned it out so that you wouldn't have to
I'll
talk
just
to
put
us.
remastered on as I'm waiting for the updates to finish, and then they finish, and I'm like, I'll just tell Sinclair that I couldn't make it, but apparently...
Are you recording, by the way?
I'm recording right now.
You're recording now?
As I fight Artorias. So this is multitasking.
Oh, there's so many things I wanted to ask you, but now I've like completely
Wait,
forgotten
so you're
about them
recording
all.
now?
I'm recording right now as I fight Artorias.
Wait. Aegon, do you know what this is the second time Richard leaves me like that?
It's almost like he's not your boyfriend.
No, we had a friggin' podcast with Loki, and do you know what? Richard was away for 2 hours.
Yeah, but do you want to fill in the rest of that sentence?
No, I do not. It's like Miyazaki lore. Fill it in yourself. He was away for 2 hours. I don't remember half the friggin' Dark Souls 3 lore or Dark Souls 1 lore. I had podcasts to edit. I didn't get enough sleep. I was half functional, and I don't know any of the Japanese translations either, so...
Okay, so when you say away, that's not technically true, because I was actually sitting here, but the thing would not connect.
So it's Australia's fault. It's not Richard's fault. It's Australia's fault.
No, I got a letter of apology from the ISP.
They should send me a letter of apology.
See, this is where Richard would be really useful.
I know, what an a-hole.
Yeah, I'll bet you, like, you know how when, like, your computer needs to update, it says, do you want to update now, or you can postpone it for 4 hours? He was probably like, okay, I could either update my computer or go on the podcast. Oh, well, let's update the computer. So on the question, how is the Abyss related to the Dark? So I think, what is the Abyss, you know, in light of that question, in the context of Dark Souls 1, would appear to be a place that Manus either gave rise to, or that Manus opened up the pathway to, based on whatever was happening to him at the hands of the Ulyssilian sorcerers, who were presumably studying him because, or, you know, experimenting on him because humans are dark. Here's a human, and, you know, because they want to study light. So if you're studying light, you're also studying dark because of how the two are related.
Wasn't Kath the one who sort of directed them or pushed them in that direction?
That they were fooled by a toothy serpent, I believe. Chester put it that way. Yeah. So interesting. That they were. I'm actually going to look at Chester's dialogue. That's a good idea. No, not Chester. Pardon me. Marvelous Chester.
Marvelous.
So earlier when I couldn't get the game sound to work.
Uh-huh.
Instead of just not saying anything when the dialogue was on, I was trying to voice all the different characters, and everyone sounded the same. Except for Siegmeyer was the one character that I could do like half decently. But everyone else, all the people in chat said that it sounded like they were all like 2-pack-a-day smokers. Because the way I was trying to do the voice.
Did you know that Richard is super talented at doing voices?
Somehow that doesn't surprise me.
Like, it's crazy, because I asked him to do a couple of voices for me for an upcoming video. And when I played it for my boyfriend, he had to do a double take. He's like, wait, is this Richard or is this the voice actor? Like, I'm like, no, that's Richard.
I had him do that on I can't remember what the context was though, or who it was. But I had him do a voice one time too, and I can't remember if I cut it out or not at the final episode. But yeah, I remember it being pretty good.
He made a German voice in a podcast once, and somebody was like, "Was that Richard?" Like they were like, "Really?"
That's amazing.
Yeah. Go on. Sorry.
God, who was it? No, it was something like it was really good. The voice that he did. It was I feel like it was a really goofy NPC, but now I can't remember. But so he says that. So we talked to Chester.
Mm-hmm.
So he talks about Artorias, okay, and then talks about the giant mushroom. Did you really slay Knight Artorias? So he says, did you really slay Knight Artorias? I've heard that the Abyss found him first, but even still, that's absolutely treacherous. Yes, magnificently so. Mwahaha. So treacherous that we killed Artorias. And then he says, believe it or not, Ulusil has brought the Abyss upon itself. Fooled by that toothy serpent, they upturned the grave of primeval man and incited his ornery wrath. So, ornery meaning bad-tempered and combative or stubborn. So,
and primeval meaning
like relating to the beginning of time. Let's see. Primeval meaning of or resembling the earliest ages in the history of the world. So, leading to a lot of the speculation at the time, and maybe this was originally the script, that Manus was the furtive pygmy. But with Dark Souls 3, whether it's a retcon or not, I can't say.
Mm-hmm.
But in Dark Souls 3, obviously we know that it's not just a furtive pygmy, that there's a bunch of furtive pygmies.
Yeah.
They upturned the grave of primeval man and incited his... So, again, so they dug up Manus, presumably trying to understand dark, or trying to understand light by virtue of its relationship with dark.
Mm-hmm.
But also, it says they were fooled by that toothy serpent. So maybe he was, hey, you guys are studying the light? Well, I'll tell you what you need to do. I can't do the voices. I can't.
This is why we need Richard.
Yep. But he says, what could they have been thinking? But to you and I, it's all ancient history. You have to ask yourself, does it really matter? I don't know if that's FromSoft saying, like, the story doesn't matter, but I guess it could be. And then, that's pretty much all. Like, he has other stuff to say, but none of it as interesting or relevant as that. But yeah, so that's, I'm not entirely sure how, presumably that was Kath who did that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see what Frampt would have had to gain by doing that.
Yeah.
Unless there was, like, poop on offer or something, but... what species has the best poop? Primeval man. Oh, dig him up! Dig him up! Need some dung pies.
Did you see my little video about Frampt?
About the dung pies?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I did, yeah. I couldn't not after you mentioned it. But yeah, that's so that question, I don't know that. What is the Abyss and how is the Abyss? So I don't really know, even though it was a good way of getting us to answer the first question in a different way. I'm not really sure about the question of how the Abyss is related to the dark, other than humans are said to be dark, humans are said to be of the Abyss.
Yeah.
And so, again, maybe it is just about excess. Anything in excess is bad, and the Abyss is all about dark, and it's so dark that it becomes I don't know. I'm not sure.
Well, you know how the Abyss only spread after they tortured Manus, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if the Abyss is not bad or good, it's whatever, but depending on how you sort of treat it is what it becomes?
Mm-hmm. So similar to the Deep, yeah.
Yeah, like if they tortured this guy and, they tortured this guy and so the Abyss spread, but because he was tortured, it was this destructive force. Mm-hmm. Maybe if they fed him cookies, it would be like this unicorn Abyss or something,
Well, and So, I think you're right. And in terms of the word ornery, which, we said means bad-tempered and combative.
Mm-hmm.
So, bad-tempered, I guess, meaning easily annoyed or made angry. So that dark isn't itself inherently evil, but it can be very volatile in the sense that if you do the wrong thing, if you treat it in the wrong way, if you expose it to the wrong conditions, then it can quickly become bad.
Yeah.
So at least that's what that word in Marvelous Chester's dialogue suggests to me.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, let's be honest, if you woke me up from like a 4,000-year nap and did not offer me coffee, I would spread the abyss everywhere too.
I think you'd spread the abyss even if you had coffee. Well, I guess maybe if it was bad coffee.
Even if you had coffee, it would spread.
Yeah.
Who dares wake me up?
Yeah. You'd be a little bit more tolerable while spreading it.
You get the abyss, and you get the abyss, and you get the abyss.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So the next one, I think this is yours again. Where is the abyss location?
Where is the? Oh, you skipped one, or did you skip it on purpose?
Yeah, shit. Sorry. How does the abyss work? Why does the abyss corrupt? If humans are of the abyss, why does it corrupt them? What is a human's normal form if they're from the abyss? So I think we answered this earlier.
Yeah.
Or at least, I gave my take on it, which is that, humans are partially made of water in our world. And, you can swim in water, we take showers, we need water, we drink water, but, you can't live in water. At least not for very long. If you're under the water, you can't breathe, right? So I think, again, at least my perspective on it is that it's probably just a matter of excess.
Mm-hmm.
That too much of anything is bad. And so, if humans are of the abyss and, this wrath has been incited, and then, there's that whole phrase, humanity run wild. So, again, it's like, it's almost like a slippery slope temper that dark has, such that it doesn't take much to set it off, and then it just escalates from there.
Yeah. It's literally my mother. Oh.
I'll take your word for it.
No, I joke. I love my mother very much.
Hopefully she doesn't listen to the podcast. No. My parents don't watch my stuff either. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And so the next one. So what is a human's? So I'm not really sure if we can even answer that. I guess it would be a pygmy. Maybe would be their normal form.
Well, it's because maybe their normal form would be the way they look before they turn into like beef jerky because they're undead.
So the normal form would be the humanity sprites then?
No, just a human with a soul, like a regular.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
So before they became undead.
Yeah, like.
But is it only that undead are of the abyss, or is it that humans are of the abyss?
Well.
Because I think it's humans, right?
Yeah. Well, wait, what does Dark Souls 3 say? Early humans, something from the abyss? Remember? The early man emerged from the abyss or something?
Oh, in the Ring City, you mean?
Yeah.
Was it the Ringed Knights armor?
Yes.
Let's see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Ringed Knight armor. Ring Knight set. Formed black armor of the Ring Knights. The armor of early men was forged in the abyss and betrays a smidgen of life. For this reason, the gods cast a seal of fire upon such armor and those who possess them. I think that's a GSF question.
That's a GSF.
I think it's above my head at this time of night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yes.
And how is the abyss connected to the flame? So I think, hold on, again, I'm gonna pull up some dialogue here. Where is Dark Souls 2 Vendrick? I love Vendrick. He did some really shitty things, but he's one of my favorite NPCs from Dark Souls 2. Like, he sucked before we could actually like go in the memory and talk to him, but
I don't think I got that far in Dark Souls 2.
you need the Ashen Mist Heart, and I think you need to kill him as well. And in order to kill him, you need like at least 3 or 4 giant souls. But yeah, he's pretty awesome. At least his voice actor is awesome. So he says, Seeker of Fire, Conqueror of Dark. I too sought fire once. With fire, they say, a true king can harness the curse. A lie, but I knew no better. So, with fire, a true king... So, insofar as being undead is a curse, to harness a curse wouldn't necessarily be a lie, because if you're harnessing humans for your own good with fire, humans being dark, then, so I guess that's why I say he wasn't a true king. He says, Seeker of Flame, you know not the depths of dark within you. It grows deeper still, the more flame you covet. So again, there's this yin and yang relationship between fire and dark, such that, that the dark within us grows deeper, the more flame you covet. And then he says, I'm king of this wretched, unraveled kingdom. I subdued the giants and claimed their strength so that I might step closer to fire. With dark unshackled, so that I might step closer to fire, Stranglake will fall, the fire will fade, and the souls of old will reemerge. With dark unshackled, a curse will be upon us, and men will take their true shape. So again, I don't know necessarily whether that means anything. I think because it's dialogue that was added with the DLC, it's probably a bit more relevant to the overall story of the trilogy than is perhaps dialogue that was in the original game, which may have been repurposed from when the game was something completely different initially.
Yeah.
So I think that Vendrick's dialogue carries significant weight in that sense compared to the rest of the dialogue in Dark Souls 2. But also, he goes on to say that, Seeker of Fire, I see you subdued another foul creature, one of the father of the abyss's spawn, that confounded quintessence of humanity. Wow. Word alphabet soup. The abyss once had form, but then dissipated, and yet traces of its existence endured. Each fragment thirsting for power, spread dark with no relent. My dear Chandra, so Nashandra, his pet name for her, which is pretty cute, was one such fragment. A feeble tiny thing that thirsted for power more than any other, driven by insatiable lust for a worthy vessel. And then he repeats lines from the intro to Dark Souls 1, and then he says, Dark was seen as a curse. Shadow is not cast, but born of fire. And the brighter the flame, the deeper the shadow. Inherit fire and harness the dark. Such is the calling of a true leader. And then continues here, if the player has all 3 DLC crowns, one day fire will fade, the dark will... So he says the same thing again. Dark will again be ours, and in our true shape, we can bury the false legends of yore. Only is this our only choice. Seeker of Fire, Coveter of the Throne seeks... Okay, so... Interesting stuff, I think. In that... I guess it doesn't really tell us anything that we didn't already know, having played all 3 of the games, but just in terms of the question of... How is the abyss connected to the flame? And this is, again, I think, related to the question that Darkblood Souls had, in that, there wouldn't be an abyss if there wasn't flame. They're 2 sides of a coin, in a sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it does seem like... Well, he says... What did he say, about the fire? The brighter the fire, the deeper the shadow.
The brighter the flame, the deeper the shadow.
Yeah, it does seem like they sort of go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, because he even references the intro to Dark Souls 1, the exact phrasing he uses, which is really interesting, but also kind of weird. Because we never find out who that lady is, the narrator. Never.
That's true.
I remember one of JSF's theories, JSF or Cassative, was that like in the end we'd find out it was like Velka all along narrating things.
That would be funny.
I think it was Cassative. She said that because you see the Corvians, like there's the Corvian storytellers, that like the camera would zoom out and it would be like just a Corvian like telling the story to a bunch of a Corvian storyteller telling the story to a bunch of Corvians.
That would be cute.
Yeah, well, I guess a little bit too cute and certain for Dark Souls, but yeah, so that's weird that like he references that directly, but still, I think there's enough in the game that suggests that that's a thing. And similarly with the Ember in the dull Ember in Dark Souls 2, it's a little bit different in that it talks about this what is it? Dull Ember. So it says an ember radiating a dull light. This flame seems nearly exhausted, but exhibits an eerie resilience. Perhaps this is its ordinary state. So in the same way that, darkness can't exist without light, I'm not sure where I was going with that, actually. Perhaps it's just that, because it's weird. I don't know. Whatever. Yeah, no, I'm done with that. Because I do find the dull ember interesting, but if it's true that flame can't go out, then the whole like conflict of Dark Souls doesn't make any sense. That the fire's fading because it can never go out.
Profaned flame can't go out. Yeah, we've solved it. We solved Dark Souls. All you need to do is get the profaned flame, bring it to the kiln, and be like, "Hey, here you go, Solace Cinder. I don't want to find you. Here's some profaned flame. Good luck. Bye."
And we can also like toss in as a sweetener in the deal. We can toss in all the handmaidens.
There we go.
They might stab you from time to time, but they do carry around very helpful lanterns because, if it's going to be all dark and abyss-like, then yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question about the how it's connected to the flame, other than, again, just pointing to Vendrick's dialogue. I think that says it as well as I could ever articulate that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so where is the abyss location?
Like I guess we talked about it in terms of, I guess, what is the abyss? Where is the abyss?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and we talked about it also with reference to the question of, when we were trying to figure out whether there's one abyss or, many abysses or abyssi, whatever.
Abyssi.
Abyssi. So yeah, in terms of Dark Souls 1 at least, there's the abyss is very clearly in Ulasil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I guess New Londo Ruins is close to Ulasil, like it's connected via the Valley of Drakes. I keep thinking about, there's this like poster that someone did, like an artist who did a poster of the world of Dark Souls 1, and they had to take a lot of liberties with how things are sort of fitted together, but I thought it was very interesting the way it came out that like the abyss was sort of right at the bottom and everything was very vertical on top of it.
Oh yeah, I think I saw that.
It, like, stunning piece of work, and certainly a testament to a testament on the one hand to the amazing world design in Dark Souls 1, but also an illustration of the fact that the way the world appears to fit together doesn't really make any sense. So, because he had to take he or she had to take considerable liberties in fitting things together to make it, to have it make sense where all the shortcuts are and stuff. So, can you talk to me about Manus, who he is?
We talked about him.
Yeah,
already.
we kind of talked about that. Yeah, and how like the unearthed and having been unearthed and primeval man, like whether or not he was the primeval man, I think is kind of irrelevant, especially now that we know about the pygmies and everything. But he was an early human.
Yeah. Whatever
the case may be, and that's presumably one of the reasons why they wanted to study him or do whatever they did with him, other than being implored to do so by Darkstalker Koth.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't answer this one, even though this is totally a Richard question. How is Manus the father of the Abyss? I was under the impression that he came into being after the Abyss, and that the Abyss was something that just always existed. But if that's true, then his title doesn't make any sense. Do you know the answer to that question?
Not really.
Because you've been like, I feel like that's something that like JSF has on his business card, like the explanation of Manus's name. Because I've heard him give the explanation so many times.
If I'm being honest, at least 75% of the time, I just take a nap while Richard talks.
What do you do when you're editing the videos?
Then I'm like, oh, this is so interesting, full of surprises.
It sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Okay, yeah, move on to the next section. Yeah, no, fair enough.
Pretty much, yeah.
Fair enough. Well, people don't realize how time-consuming video editing is, so...
Yeah.
So I don't... I can't speak to the specifics of the mistranslation here, if indeed you can call it a mistranslation, but the term, and this also relates to a question that we had later from Nick, who asks, who is the mother of the Abyss? And so that really gets at the heart of the issue with this translation, and that is, he's not the biological father of the Abyss. So he's not being talked about as though he, the Abyss sprung from his loins, as it were. It's a more appropriate translation would perhaps be, and just going from memory about what JSF has said, is the Lord of the Abyss.
Okay.
Or and I hesitate to use this term too, just because of how loaded it is because of Bloodborne, but like the host of the Abyss is, I think, another potential translation that he mentioned.
Interesting.
So there isn't a mother of the Abyss because he's not the biological father of the Abyss. And I think the root of the mistranslation is the whole idea of someone being the father of blank. So just because it's at the top of my mind, because I was just writing about this yesterday, Francis Bacon is considered by some to be one of the fathers of modern science, or one of the fathers of the experimental method, because, he was around at a time before scientist was really even a thing, the term scientist. So it would be erroneous to describe him as a scientist, but he was and is considered by many to be the father of, certain aspects of what became modern science. So that's, I think, the term that, or, the kind of thing that the English translators were going after when they went with the term father instead of Lord of the Abyss, or whatever it was. Maybe they thought Lord of the Abyss does sound kind of strange, but certainly it would be a little bit less misleading than the term father of the Abyss, because, in Western society, we think generally of, that he's a father of the Abyss. Okay, so, and that's why this question isn't unreasonable from Nick, that who is the mother of the Abyss, but yeah, so, and he also, I was under the impression that, so, we answered the rest of this earlier in our discussion about how, it's possible that he spawned the Abyss, or that, he somehow opened up a physical passage which allowed him and everyone else in Ulasil to access the Abyss.
Yeah.
And then the next one, again, we already kind of answered. What would it mean for the Abyss to consume the world? And that is, again, an interesting question, I think, because in spite of the fact that we've already kind of addressed it, because that would make the central conflict of Dark Souls really inconsequential, wouldn't it?
What you mean?
That if fire and dark exist in this adversarial but also symbiotic relationship, where fire grows and the shadows fade, but then the fire fades and the shadows become more pronounced.
Wait,
I think I have that backwards. I have that backwards. Yeah. Whatever the case, I'm tired. I'm sorry, but in that case, like, if they have to exist in this relationship where one necessarily leads to the, I guess they don't necessarily have to. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud mostly here. But and I think the source of my confusion is that damn Ember item description again, because it says that maybe this is the flame's natural state, that it doesn't go out, right?
Maybe it was talking
so
about,
I think that's what's confusing me.
Profane flame specifically.
Or maybe it's that, because that's the last episode of Let's Talk Lore we did. Because the way I think about Dark Souls lore these days is just, what episode do I have coming up? And that's like the only thing I think about, just because, I've been so busy with other things. So a lot of the stuff today has been me also trying to remember things from Dark Souls 1, which thankfully, because of the remaster edition, I've had Dark Souls 1 on my mind. So so now the deep, I guess, which I think Richard is probably much more equipped to answer these, but in his continued absence, I'm okay to at least give my thoughts on things. So, poning bronies? What is the deep? Would love to hear about the deep. Not much is known, as far as I'm aware, about the deep, aside from Aldrich having dreamed about it. As a huge lover of Dark Souls lore, I'm sorry to disappoint. To disappoint you, huge lover of Dark Souls lore. I guess that is another thing that we kind of talked about earlier, or at least I gave my perspective on it, that I can't really say much about what specifically the deep is, but in general terms, I think the whole idea of like the age of the coming deep sea and everything is that it ties back into this idea of the unknown being really scary and being the source of fear and all these potentially terrible and awful things, and that in our own world, the oceans are this place that, even though we've explored virtually every square meter of the entire world, we still have like a enormously long way to go in understanding what is in our waters. I think that's the general idea, at least, that they're trying to get across with the deep. And, of course, connecting it back to Bloodborne. And I saw someone had a tweet about the room in which we fight Rom, the quote unquote room.
Yeah,
the Moonside Lake.
Down in the Bloodborne section.
Deep and other games. So similarities and
it's Ike Break. It's the third. When you go down under Bloodborne.
Yep, page 4.
It's like the third tweet.
1, 2. Oh, okay, perfect. We know from the Four Kings battle that we fall to the abyss and it is a full black environment. And New Londo was underwater. In Bloodborne, we fall to the... See, I don't know that I would agree with using the word abyss in the context of the Moonside Lake, because we know it's a place called the Moonside Lake and it's not an abyss, as we've sort of defined it in this conversation. Being... Again, if I can play Fun with Definitions for a moment, if I even still have it up. I do not. So, fuck. Abyss being, I love, like, if you type define into my Google search box, it's all like Dark Souls words. A deep or seemingly bottomless chasm. That's not what I think of when we're in the Moonside Lake. It's a lake that we're somehow walking on after being submerged in it. So I was thinking about that earlier, and then the original question where we started was Pwn and Brownies. Yeah, just about the deep. And I guess, again, we've already kind of talked about this, but where is it located and how does it work? I think where it is located, or where, JSF doesn't think, I don't think, the last time we talked, JSF said that we don't believe that anymore with respect to the body of water under the Cathedral of the Deep being the deep. So obviously I can't speak for him, and he is like the deep expert, but again, I would suggest that it's possible that the deep is in many places, and that just based on some of the things, so the Human Dregs item description says that basically they sink to the lowest depths imaginable. So it's possible that the core of the planet, whatever planet it is that we're on in Dark Souls 3, is water. which sounds absurd, but there is a moon in our very solar system, which is basically a water world. Like, it's Europa has, a massive sheet of ice around it, but, untold, because again, we don't even know what's in our own ocean, let alone a water moon on the outskirts of the solar system. So
Aegon, are you saying
Yeah.
Kevin Costner's Waterworld takes place on the moon?
it takes place in a realm where everything is Virtual Boy colored. Because that's the only water world I saw. I actually owned a Virtual Boy back in the day. And it was great for like 10 minutes. Waterworld was the worst of the games, though, that I owned. But yeah, no, like, I don't think it's inconceivable to suggest that the deep is in many places.
Mm-hmm.
Although, relevant birthday card is relevant. Allison Baker, she created like a birthday card where I'm depicted in Lego, which is like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And the text reads, literally every body of water. Is this the deep?
Oh yeah, I saw it. That was awesome.
So So, maybe that's just my thing. And, I have that preconceived notion and then I just can't see any other possibilities. But I don't know. But certainly it would appear that it has some sort of magical property which permits, the Mercmen to teleport places, and similarly, as I've argued, the Dancer as well. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer or not.
No, try again.
How about we go to the next one instead? So how does it work? Again, is another, and I guess in a sense that forces me to elaborate on what I said about the human dregs a little bit more, in that this is something that I've suggested to Richard, but he sort of rejected it on the basis of the probably true point that they were more likely referencing something in, from an Eastern philosophical or spiritual perspective, as opposed to, a very Western one. And that is, in Aristotelian cosmology, the various elements, the Aristotelian elements, so those, the elements proffered by Aristotle and his contemporaries, suggested that the elements had different weights. And I think it's dirt, or whatever it was, earth was the most heavy, and so it sank to the bottom. And so, you could maybe look at the deep and the world of Dark Souls as being governed by an Aristotelian cosmology in that sense, in that like certain things just sink. And the human dregs are, one of those things. And so it's possible that the deep isn't water at all, and that it's just these liquefied remains of these humans. In whatever the like bioeconomy is, I guess, of Lothric. And how is it connected to the flame? I see what you're doing now.
I see what you're doing now.
See, that's something I have no idea how to answer that one, though. Like with the Abyss, I feel like like we covered it pretty well, at least like, a reasonable perspective on it. But I haven't the faintest clue how the deep is connected to the flame.
Well, maybe it could like not be connected. Maybe it's just a new age, a new thing that's supposed to sort of come.
Although, because there's that one item description that says about Aldrich that because I think it mentions in that item description, it's the one about the age of the coming deep sea. It says, when Aldrich, so it has to be connected because of the way this item description is phrased. So the soul of Aldrich, when Aldrich ruminated on the fading of the fire, it inspired visions of a coming age of the deep sea. He knew the path would be arduous, but he had no fear he would devour the gods himself. So, suggesting perhaps, because we've seen this time and again through all three games, that, this vision he had of the coming age of the deep sea was his vision of how he might be able to transcend the cycle of light and dark.
Yeah.
Because it was inspired. He had these visions. They were inspired by his ruminations. So he was thinking about the fading of the fire.
Yeah.
And that led him to, inspired visions of a coming age of the deep sea. So how, I guess, how it's connected to the flame is really the only hint we have for that is that item description. And the connection to Aldrich, that's it as well. And the connection between the deep and the abyss. So something that I have like fucking 30 tabs open here. Across all these different Dark Souls wikis. I wanted to look at because is there a dark gem in Dark Souls 3? I know there's a deep gem. There is a hollow gem, which is, it looks like a hollow. And a dark gem. Let me see. There's the deep gem. Yeah, there's a dark. Okay, so the dark gem is like dark purple crystals. And the deep gem, just looking at the photos, whereas the dark gem really, again, I think reflects the running wild of humanity, because it says that it's a gem of infused titanite, born of disembodied humanity. And we see gems just like that all over the swamp in the Ring City, that are, clearly dark gems. So it's born of disembodied humanity. So it's crystallized humanity. And dark weapons inflict dark damage and scale with intelligence and faith. And the deep gem, it says it's a gem of infused titanite found in the dregs of the Cathedral of the Deep. Use an infusion to deep weapons. I think that's a transposition error. There is a darkness that lies beyond human ken. So that lies beyond human understanding. So again, the eldritch theme of, like the Lovecraftian theme of there's certain things that we just can't comprehend. And so what I think this means, found in the dregs of the Cathedral of the Deep, is that I think, because, this is not, again, this isn't a new thing. Like we saw it in Bloodborne especially, that these worlds that FromSoft creates, they often are concerned with bioeconomies. So that is to say, economies that deal with what we might describe in our world, at least, as biological materials. So, but in the context of Dark Souls, if the dark gem is disembodied humanity that's crystallized, and then you look at the deep gem, and it's much more ordered, it's like squished into blocks. And, together with the suggestion that it's found in the dregs of the Cathedral of the Deep, that the deep gem is, and this is obviously complete speculation, but just based on all the things I just said, perhaps a more concentrated version of darkness, or darkness that is extracted from some aspect of humanity. Like, because there's also this discussion about luck being the essence of humanity in Dark Souls 3. So what if the deep gem is basically, disembodied humanity, but devoid of its essence? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, in that it is it is extracted from the darkness of humanity. Okay. In that it's not necessarily a concentrated form of it, but so think about in Bloodborne, I don't know how much, if you watch the entirety of Bloodborne Let's Talk lore, but I also talked about, even before the DLC, the idea of bloodletting in the context of the what the heck is the blood curse called again? Wow, it's been so long since I've even thought about Bloodborne.
The what?
The Scourge of the Beast. That, in the DLC we learned with the bloodletter and everything that they were trying to let blood from wow, I've forgotten everything about Bloodborne. From Lawrence. to get the cursed blood out of him, right? And so it seems almost like there's a similar thing happening here in that they're taking the, a part. There's a word I'm looking for, but that I'm not getting. It's made of a constituent biological material that is found in dark humans, in the dark of humanity. That is, again, complete and utter speculation, but based on your bafflement, I'm gonna assume that it is a terrible suggestion. But
no, it's magnificent. Also, it's like, you gotta keep in mind, it's like 10 o'clock. And it's a Friday.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So the hamster in my brain isn't rolling as fast as usual,
Yeah. No, same here.
But
same here.
like the gem, it's like squares or cubes. It kind of reminds me of Aldrich's coffin.
Yeah. But and that's what I mean in terms of when you compare it to the dark gem. The dark gem is, again, very, very reminiscent of humanity running wild. It's a natural process, right? And like a volatile one. Whereas the deep gem looks like there was someone who specifically crushed these things into cubes. Yeah. So it suggests that there's an agency involved there in producing the deep gems. Whereas, the crystals of the dark gem, as we see in the DLC, is just a naturally occurring thing where there exists disembodied humanity.
Where do we find deep gems again?
In the Cathedral of the Deep. That's what's mentioned in the item description, but like several other places as well.
Do we find them on people or just...
I think we find one being guarded by... we find one in like the swamp thing, I think, but then we also find another one being guarded by an evangelist. We do find them elsewhere. I just can't remember where.
Yeah, but, like people drop it or whatever, or some but you don't find them, like you said, you don't find them growing on anyone, right?
No, yeah, and that's the thing, right? So, yeah, I'm not sure, but like, if you look at, I think there's a lot to be learned by just sort of studying how all the various different gems relate to one another, and that's something that I've been planning on doing in Let's Talk Lore like since the beginning, but it's like such. It's such an undertaking that like it's hard to find an episode in which to squeeze it in, but connection between the deep and the abyss.
But look here, it says deep weapons inflict dark damage. So the dark again.
But I'm not saying it's distinct though, right? That it's made of a constituent element within dark. But so deep weapons inflict, but they lose scaling effects. Whereas, again, so maybe I'm actually not that far off in suggesting that it's basically dark, but with the essence of humanity removed. So that is to say, the essence of humanity in Dark Souls 3, or according to Dark Souls 3, is luck. And so you have the hollow gem, which is just the essence of humanity, therefore it scales with luck. So it has the scaling element. And you have, so the three are sort of like a paper, rock, scissors when you think about it. That two of them do dark damage, and two of them scale. Although only one is luck. But so I guess you get luck plus dark equals scaling with intelligence and faith. And you could create like a mathematical equation that makes sense of it if like you're not as tired as I am. I'm sure it would make sense. It makes sense conceptually anyway.
Awesome.
And then in the Ring City DLC, the Merkmen pop up from the deep. So this is Signal on Salet. Do you think the fire fading increases the deep's presence / influence, similar to the abyss? Or is the massive deformation of the world seen in the Dreadkeep moving the deep to the surface, almost as if it was a layer of soil? I like that a lot. I don't know about you.
I love it.
And like certainly it provides a more feasible mechanical explanation to what I was saying earlier about, like referencing Europa as this moon that is basically a giant ocean, but it's circular. It's, a sphere or whatever. And in this instance, because the landscape is moving so much, that maybe that explains why the deep is seemingly in so many places, or why those who have access to the deep can use it sort of as a wormhole network in a sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in Dark Souls 1, there's no movement, right? So maybe that's why there's no deep. Whereas in Dark Souls 3,
the only movement we see. Sorry, you go on.
So like in Dark Souls 3, everything sort of moves toward on Lothric or whatever. And so maybe like what Salad is saying, like because there's movement, that's why we see the deep now. Like because
Well, it certainly helps to explain why, again, because this question starts with the Merkmen, right, popping up from the deep. So it certainly helps to explain that, and that, and especially the suggestion as if it was a layer of soil would probably be more, that is, I think, much more feasible than suggesting that the core of the planet is made of water or of whatever the deep liquid is. I like that a lot, actually.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Big Easy 66. Oh, and the one thing that I did mean to add is that the only instance in which we see the Abyss being used as like a wormhole network is when Manus pulls you into the DLC essentially. Whereas in Dark Souls 2, Dark Souls 2 we have it as well. With the Dark Diver Covenant, where we have to offer a human effigy, and then he opens up like a portal to the Abyss. But it's not like a portal in the middle of nowhere. Like there's a platform on which you have to stand, and the portal opens in the middle. So it seems like it's much more institutionalized. Like it's a technological solution to get there. Whereas Manus was just, using the rage and the fact that he's the Lord of the Abyss to reach through time to get at least us. And at least Chester.
Yeah.
And presumably Artorias as well, because actually that's because he was from that time. He didn't go back in time. Never mind. The Big Easy 66 in the swamps of the Ring City relate. Is the swamp of the Ring City related to the same liquid in Aldrich's arena? And is the strange water in Medira's boss arena, where many speculate is the same area where the Lord of the Dark Souls were found in the Dark Souls 1 opening, it does look like that, related to the deep sea Aldrich foresaw? I think the water in Aldrich's, or the liquid in Aldrich's arena, is probably the same liquid that we find at McLoif's pool or whatever that place is called. What is it? That bonfire, McLoif's Rest or something?
I have no idea. No.
You know what I'm talking about in Irithyll? Between Irithyll and Anor Londo, where the Covenant is for the Aldrich Faithful.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
and you fight the two watchdogs of the Old Lords, basically. And so
there's also the
if you look at the water there,
the Cathedral of the Deep, where the giants are.
That I think is a little bit different, because I think that's just mostly the giant's poop. Because it's brown, right? And then there's the other area where the water's clear. And there's no giant there, right? So I think that's meant to be, because you also find dung pies in there. True. But we find in the where McLoif is, and the two watchdogs of the Cold Lords, I think someone said back in the day, that we find human dregs there, suggesting that liquid is, contains, or, might perhaps be entirely made up of human dregs. So, and in Aldrich's, we know that Aldrich likes eating people. So I don't think that those are related, though, to the swamp in the DLC, except insofar as we were correct in suggesting that the crystal, the dark gem, is related to the deep gem, and that the deep gem is made up of constituent elements that are contained within the dark gem. So it's sort of an extracted part of the dark gem. And then the word dreg, okay, let's see, define dreg, means Okay, so this is vocabulary.com and not the usual Google thing that pops up. The dregs are the least wanted portion or the residue. Literally speaking, dregs refers to the sediment at the bottom of a liquid such as tea, but figuratively you can use dregs to mean a small amount left. So rather than being something that was specifically extracted from humans, dregs would appear to be just the stuff that Aldrich didn't want to eat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if it's dreg, because it like the example that's given here is the sediment at the bottom of a liquid such as tea.
Who do you offer the dregs to?
To McLoy.
So he wants
corpse
to eat
anyway. I don't know if it's that he wants to eat them as much as it is he wants proof that you are eating people who are coming to, fight Aldrich, maybe?
Ew.
Well, because, it does say that Aldrich liked having other people eat people too, right? So, and, you can't eat all the bones and everything, so, whatever's left over. It's kind of like, I remember when I was a kid, my favorite thing to eat as a kid was lobster, and I couldn't fucking comprehend. Me and my dad would go to Red Lobster, which is a restaurant in Ontario at least, and Dad, why aren't we eating half of the lobster? We're only eating half and I didn't understand the concept of that's stuff that you don't want to eat. So that's the dregs of the lobster, right? So there's some part of the human that Aldrich doesn't want to eat, and that becomes the dregs, the human dregs.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how that relates to the deep gem. The significance of bodies of water in Bloodborne. So that's a JSF question, mostly because I haven't played Bloodborne since Let's Talk Lore, which ended in fucking May 2016. Mm-hmm. It's been 2 years since that series ended.
You should restart it.
So that's how long it's been.
You should do it again.
No.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm already writing 2 dissertations, one with Let's Talk Lore and one my actual dissertation.
Hey, Gon, have you not seen all the cut content that's coming out?
I haven't seen any of it, just because, one game to worry about at a time. Maybe after I'm done with Dark Souls 3, Let's Talk Lore, but go back and look at all that stuff. But I do find it interesting. It's just I just don't have the intellectual energy to be engaged in more than one game when really the one game I am engaged in is probably more than I should be engaged in, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense.
The deep thematic similarities to stuff from... So Michael Bernard, can you discuss the deep thematic similarities to stuff from Miyazaki's other games? That is the impurity, stagnation, vermin motif from Bloodborne. I think the deep as a concept can be more easily understood when viewed in the context of Miyazaki's body of work. So I think we talked about that in terms of the overlapping development periods with Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, and how, seemingly at some point Miyazaki took his own Lovecraftian turn in the same way that Bloodborne halfway through takes a Lovecraftian turn. And he became very interested in that stuff. But, there were certainly hints of it in the earlier games. I've only ever played... I've never played Armored Core or anything. So that would be a question that would be best addressed to either JSF or Cassidov, because I know they've both played... Cassidov especially has played a lot of, not Miyazaki games, but FromSoft games more generally. Because again, I don't think it's all Miyazaki.
Yeah.
This tweet from Dark Lurker makes me sad. 3 favorite loresters together again.
Oh.
2. Do the 3 of you have any theories on Dark Souls 2's Dark Lurker? That is actually a very interesting question. And my first ever playthrough on my channel was, I think, February 2015. And it was Dark Souls 2 Let's Talk Lore. And it was obviously a very different series than what Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3 Let's Talk Lore ended up being. In part because, a series premised on viewer participation. But at the time, I didn't really have many viewers. So, and I can't even remember whether... I'm pretty sure I did fight Dark Lurker. But it's such a hard boss fight. It's a great boss fight. I love it. But it's really hard such that I don't know that I really talked all that much lore about it. But Dark Lurker is very interesting in that... Do you know the boss that is being referred to here?
Yeah, it's the angel-looking guy.
Yeah, and it splits in 2, kind of like
The wet nurse or something?
Kind of like Sullivan. Almost identical to Sullivan, actually.
Huh.
In that, although, well, Sullivan's a little bit different in that I think both of the Dark Lurkers are kind of shades, whereas Sullivan summons a shade of himself, but he's still there. It's like a shadow, whereas the Dark, so yeah, it is a little bit different. The Dark Lurkers both sort of behave and move independently of one another. So yeah, I'm not really sure. It has also been a while since, even though Dark Souls 2, I think, is the Souls game I spent the most time playing, simply because of the PvP. Although I have no way of knowing just because of freaking my 360's hard drive crapping out. Otherwise I might at least be able to like add up the various builds, the hours played, and see what it was. But oh yeah, we didn't even really get to talk about Solaire. What is Solaire, or what is his story? Why is he obsessed with the sun? No, he's not the first heir according to Dark Souls 3. I did think that he was at the time. Mm-hmm. And what do I think of? What do we think of Solaire? I like Solaire. Will this involve the infamous Solaire soup, or how Solaire is definitely the Karthus worm? So the Solaire soup idea, do you want to... Because, like, I'm vaguely familiar with that. Are you familiar with that?
It's the soup that you find when you walk around.
So that he's basically, like, everywhere?
I have no idea.
Like,
I didn't even realize it could be Solaire soup until, like, Richard told me, like he walks around and makes you soup, and then when you're hungry, you eat it, I guess? I have no idea. I don't know.
Have you ever played Final Fantasy VII?
I haven't played any Final Fantasies. I have a life.
Yeah, I guess, and you, like, only recently got, like, into video games, right? Because your boyfriend,
I had,
right? I'm trying to remember your appearance on Don't Give Up Skeleton.
No, I used to play video games when I was younger. Then, like, during college/university times, like, I had no time. So I restarted playing them a few years ago with the PS3.
But you were never into, like, turn-based RPGs or whatever?
Not particularly, no.
Final Fantasy VII is one of my favorite games ever, but I'm just thinking of this in relation to, in Final Fantasy VII, it's a very environmentally themed game, in that the whole game, maybe not the whole game, but at least like the first disc, the moving action, the conflict at first is about, you're a part of this, and actually, at least in the context of the world, a terrorist organization called Avalanche that is bombing these reactors. They're called Mako reactors. And what the Mako reactors are doing is essentially extracting fossil fuel. So the planet has a life stream, which, you know, you could look at as oil, because oil is essentially, you know, dead animals from long past, right? That the planet has a life stream, and that the life stream can be harnessed. It's sort of like a liquid or a mist or something, that you can harness it and basically compress it into something called Mako, or materia, that is used for energy. But, you know, the problem is, of course, when you extract too much of it, you know, again, like the theme from earlier, everything in excess is bad. And in that game, there is a character who dies. I don't know why I'm like skirting around the spoiler here, because the game is fucking 12 years old, but at the time it was like a huge shock that this character died. No. And this character, do you know who I'm talking about?
Is it a girl that dies? Yeah, they showed it in the trailer.
Arius or Arieth, depending on the translation of the game you played. But I played the one, it was Arius, Aeris. But yeah, apparently it's supposed to be Aerith, which is still weird to me because, yeah. But so she dies, and she is basically returned to the life stream. And then in the end of the game, she helps us as like a spirit in the life stream. So it's kind of like not just, you know, the carcasses and biological materials of dead animals being decomposed into oil and fossil fuels, but it is, and again, that's literally why they're called fossil fuels, because they're basically made of fossils. But and that's obviously an oversimplification, but in this game, yeah, the Arius becomes a part of the life stream, and then she, you know, spiritually helps people out. So it's kind of like the spirits of all the people who have died in the past and whatever. And so I guess maybe something analogous could be happening with Solaire, But at least as I understand, or as we've discussed, the Firelink Shrine Nestling in Dark Souls 3, the Trading Crow in Dark Souls 3, the way that in my Firelink Shrine episode in Let's Talk Lore, JSF and I talked about this, and what I suggested was essentially that the Trading Crow is a sort of window into the previous games, a fan service portal, if you will, that, you know, you can't necessarily have Solaire's armor anywhere else in the game, or Lucatiel's mask, and have it make sense.
Yeah.
Just because they're long gone at that point. So that's why you put them with the Trading Crow, because you can still have the items in the game, and you don't need to actually have it make sense. So I don't know that if Solaire was the soup, I don't know that the crows, like, I'm sure we would find his like armor set in that kitchen or something. It would be a shiny in one of the pots or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know that we find his talisman in front of one of the things.
People are saying Solaire is literally the soup?
Isn't that what these people are saying? Solaire soup?
I thought Solaire made the soup. Like, he walks around and he makes you soup when you're not looking. That's what I thought.
So there's potentially a scene that we don't see in Dark Souls 3.
Yeah.
Of Solaire and Sigvard standing side by side making soup in the kitchen at Iroquois Dungeon. Because that soup is there no matter what, whether Sigvard's there or not. and when Sigvard's, you know, he doesn't say, hey, go over there and drink the soup. He gives it to you. Like, you drink it right there. So I guess that's the other possibility.
Maybe.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, this guy shows up just as I'm leaving.
Yeah, the thing is that Microsoft are very concerned about my privacy. So they decided that they had to spend 2 hours installing updates as soon as I turned the computer on. Yeah.
Are you on like a 486 or something? It's like a Commodore 64.
No. I haven't it did that thing where it's like 1%, and then like 10 minutes later 2%, and then that finished, and then it was like, now we have to install the next update.
Wow.
Richie, are you recording?
No, I'm not. Hang on.
Oh, start fucking recording. You know I don't work with shitty sound.
Yeah. Hang on. I'm fighting Artorias, by the way.
Oh, and remastered?
Yeah.
I
thought you would have finished by now, so I was like...
Me?
Yeah.
No, I only...
No, I thought you two would have finished recording by now.
Oh, so you strategically planned it out so that you wouldn't have to talk to us.
No, I thought I'll just put remastered on as I'm waiting for the updates to finish, and then they finished, and I'm like, I'll just tell Sinclair that I couldn't make it, but apparently...
Are you recording, by the way?
I'm recording right now.
You're recording now?
As I fight Artorias. So this is multitasking.
Oh, there's so many things I wanted to ask you, but now I've like completely forgotten
so
about
you're
them
recording
all.
now?
I'm recording right now as I fight Artorias.
Wait, Aegon, do you know what this is the second time Richard leaves me like that?
It's almost like he's not your boyfriend.
No, we had a friggin' podcast with Loki, and do you know what? Richard was away for 2 hours.
Yeah, but do you want to fill in the rest of that sentence?
No, I do not. It's like Miyazaki lore. Fill it in yourself. He was away for 2 hours. I don't remember half the friggin' Dark Souls 3 lore or Dark Souls 1 lore. I had podcasts to edit. I didn't get enough sleep. I was half functional, and I don't know any of the Japanese translations either. So, yeah.
Okay, so when you say away, that's not technically true, because I was actually sitting here, but the thing would not connect.
So it's Australia's fault. It's not Richard's fault. It's Australia's fault.
No, I got a letter of apology from the ISP.
They should send me a letter of apology.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah, they sent us all letters saying we're sorry, but like we're changing the connections or something, so we turned off the
your
phone
internet
lines in that area. Yeah, for like a couple of hours.
Now we just needed a letter of apology from Microsoft for keeping you off with the updates.
Next
time it's going to be
just
Apple,
concerned
like your
about my
iPhone was
privacy.
updating and you couldn't use your PC because of it or
I
whatever.
haven't updated. I have an iPad from 2010 that has still, like, it still works, but nothing works. Like, I can't update anything.
Boyfriend, guess who decided to show up? Yeah, Richard.
Okay, I gotta go, so let me...
I'm going to assume she wasn't this sassy before I showed up.
There was sass, but I
Okay,
talked
good.
most of the time, so she was
Okay,
she was
good.
trying not to fall asleep, I think. But
Well, I'll listen to this when it's up.
let me verify a couple things just so that
Okay.
I know that I didn't say anything extremely dumb. Manus, Father of the Abyss, essentially means Lord of the Abyss, right?
Yeah. I don't know
So
why
that-
they did Father.
I quizzed. What I suggested is that maybe it was something like, when they say like someone is a father of a field, father of.
Well, the thing is,
chemistry.
like, the Abyss, it says it's spread from Manus. So he is kind of the
so we
father
missed
of the,
that
but-
earlier.
Yeah, someone in Ulasil says, like, basically the Manus created, like, he doesn't create the Abyss, but because he's got so much humanity, he's sort of like patient zero, and everything spreads from that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm suggesting because of the relationship between light and dark, the Ulusilians were concerned about studying light, the sorcerers,
Right.
and so it is suggested that they were fooled into unearthing Manus by Darkstalker Koth
Yeah.
or Frent, depending on your perspective. But I suggested that maybe they were studying him because light and dark have this relationship, and if they're studying light, that also means having to study dark.
Yeah.
The darkness within humanity.
Yeah.
And there were all these other things I had. The whole idea of the deep sea,
Yeah.
the coming age of the deep sea, as being potentially in Aldrich's eyes, because it was inspired by his ruminations of the fading of the flame,
Yep.
and so therefore he was thinking of it as a way of
Look a
transcending.
bit like the Chasm of the Abyss when you see it in Ulasil, because it's just like this. Because I just played through Ulasil then, and like,
Funnily enough, earlier I was saying the opposite, that it didn't look that way.
okay, well they're both holes.
Interesting. Yeah, what the heck else? There was and yeah, the whole idea of the deep sea as potentially hinting at just the fact that in our world we don't really understand what's in the ocean at all. Like, we know a little bit about the ocean, but not very much. So the ocean floor is, a very unknown and potentially scary place, right? In the same sense that
And it does,
an
it does seem
eldritch...
to be, when you go into the ringed city, there's the Merkmen.
Mm-hmm.
It says they came from the deep, and if you look at them, they're covered in barnacles. So it does seem to be like some sort of ocean thing.
I did not notice the barnacles. Interesting.
I think they changed the idea of what the deep was in between the base game and the DLC, though. Yeah, because if you just pay attention to the base game, the deep is just one.
The cathedral, the water under the cathedral of the deep, right?
Yeah, and then by the time you get to the DLC, it's more like it's just the deep is under everything. I mean, maybe the deep has spread. I don't know.
Well, what Signal on Salet suggested is that because of the fact that the Earth is shifting, the world is shifting.
Yeah.
That maybe it says that the deep's presence / influence similar to the abyss, or is the massive deformation of the world seen in the dry keep moving the deep to the surface, almost as if it was a layer of soil.
Yeah, it could be. Something like that.
Human dregs, the leftovers of the stuff that Aldrich didn't want to eat, of the humans that he ate.
Yeah.
Potentially, yeah.
Well, human dregs are like messed up humanity, it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's all this other stuff too, but like, I don't want to rush through this. So, but I unfortunately got to get going.
Yeah, no, it's
yeah,
all right.
Thanks a lot, Richard.
Yeah. Well, we can keep talking.
Fine.
Now you're just gonna have JSF saying that like everything I told you was wrong. So I'm looking forward to watching or listening to these podcasts because it's gonna be like.
It's like
what?
a nice.
You
red
could
ray.
do like, what does JSF think? What does Aegon of Astara think? And like sort of compare them. It'd be pretty interesting.
Oh, so you guys want me to have more of an editing nightmare than I have on a regular basis?
Yes. It's the price of our contributions.
Well, I've explained this to her. Like, if she wants to keep me doing 2-hour-long podcasts on a weekly basis, then like this is the price she pays.
My penance.
Yep. Not unfair.
Okay.
But yeah, I did like a 3.5-hour stream right before getting on Discord at 7:30, so I'm pretty pooped. So
Well,
I'm gonna get going.
Thanks so much for coming, man.
Yeah.
This was super fun.
Yeah, don't mention. I'm looking forward to seeing the videos
Yeah,
whenever they're ready.
this was much more fun than if GSF was around while we talked.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because then it would have just been like, you know, an academic thing.
Well, because if GSF was here, then it would make sense.
No, it wouldn't, because we're talking. If Dark Souls 3 is involved, it's not going to make sense.
Well, but like, you know, like questions about Bloodborne and stuff, where I'm just like, yeah, there's no way. Like, I was very proud of myself that I figured out, like, or I didn't figure out, that I remembered what you said about Manus's name and stuff, so.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
So there was that. So so you did help, even though you weren't here, so
I think
job.
trying to make... Like, I've been talking with Lance McDonald, the guy who's hacking and doing the data mining, and like... Everything he's dug up is just further evidence that, like, Dark Souls 3's story was kind of improvised, basically, at the last minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
like,
that's a story for another day.
Like, you know,
though.
I've been making fun of Pontiff Sullivan for years, and it turns out that, like, as late as the playable alpha, Pontiff Sullivan wasn't a character. So...
So not so much the central character that we thought
No,
he
he's
was,
not
I guess.
anything. They literally just made him up at the last minute. Because
Makes
they
sense
did,
that he's a
like,
mid-boss,
They played
but-
musical chairs with some of the bosses, and he ended up somewhere else. I guess he's Pontiff Sullivan now.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note,
Thanks
I'll
so
catch you
much,
later.
guys.
I might as well end this because, I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys say about me after I'm gone.
Okay.
All right, thanks, man.
I'll send you a link to these audio files either here or on Twitter, and I'll just put it in my
Super.
Dropbox.
Super duper. Thanks,
Okie dokes.
man. See
Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.
What do you have to say for yourself, Richard?